Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome into this brand new edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast here on YouTube. Of course, I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can always follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. And as always, thank you so much for taking just a few minutes out of your day to join me to talk some Packers football. I'm not going to take too long today. I'm going to be going over my top 10 players who have graded throughout the course of this season so far. Of course, I've graded every player on every play throughout the year, and I'm going to give you my top 10 graded players so far on the season. Before I get to that, though, obviously one of the really key takeaways from Thursday was the fact that Davante Adams did not practice, which is going to be really a potentially huge issue for this Packers team if he's not able to play against the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday. Friday should be a huge indicator as to whether or not he has a chance to go on Sunday. I'm sure Matt LaFleur in his Friday press conference will say something to the effect of, we're going to give him up until game time to see if he can go or not, but that Friday is usually a huge indicator as to whether or not they're actually going to be able to play in the game. I wouldn't put it by Davante if he's not able to practice on Friday to play on Sunday, but it's definitely going to be worth monitoring. And if he's limited on Friday, I would say that that's a pretty good indicator that he's probably going to play. You never know for sure. Green Bay's been very cautious with injuries, rightfully so. But this is a huge player for the Packers coming up for this Colts game. They are going to need him. This is a very tough opponent. We don't know for sure yet if Allen Lazard is going to be activated. It looked for a while like the Packers may have their full complement of weapons for the first time. Now we're not even sure if Lazard or Davante Adams is going to play. So that's a really key thing to watch for at Friday's practice. And as all the beat writers start tweeting out whether or not, who was practicing and who wasn't, keep an eye out as to whether or not Davante Adams is practicing on Friday or not. All right, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I'm just going to kind of list my top 10 players that I've graded so far this season for the Packers. I think it's worth noting at least a little bit as we go into this. Not all positions are created equal. I've not gone through the time, effort, and energy, I guess, if you will, to, build a formula to kind of figure out the, weighted, positional values and things like that. So yes, a quarterback has more opportunity, both good and bad, than a lot of the other positions. Defensive back and wide receiver, they're going to be a little bit different. So it's not always worth, ranking these players against each other, but I still think it's going to tell you a huge piece of the story as you see my 10 highest graded players throughout the course of this season so far. I think for the most part, a lot of these names aren't going to surprise you, but let's go through them, starting with number 10. Number 10 on my list is Jamaal Williams with a plus 3.10 grade. I've really been impressed with how Jamaal Williams has kind of remade his game. Much better receiver, a little bit more explosion this year. Still not finding maybe those big explosive plays. That's still kind of been an issue for him, but he is an all-around running back, and he's really provided a ton of value for the Packers as Aaron Jones has been out and really as a 1-2 punch at running back for Green Bay. Number 9 on my list, maybe the most surprising player on this list, is Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard, remember, came off that fantastic game against the New Orleans Saints, had a really solid start to the season, looked like he was clicking on all cylinders, and then, of course, had the core injury. He's been out. He's going to be coming back sooner rather than later, hopefully, fingers crossed. But he had a really nice start to the season and still is number 9 on my list despite missing all the games that he has. Number 8 on my list, Za'Darius Smith. This is maybe a little bit of a disappointment. Was my number 1 graded player in 2019. Just blew my defensive grades, through the roof. Highest graded defensive player that I had ever had from my time grading the Packers. But he's a little bit lower this year. Still solid, plus 3.45 grade. But it's worth noting, too, he didn't really start coming on. He had a really nice start to the season, but not to the extent of how he finished last year. He finished ridiculous last year. So if he does that again, a really strong grade for Za'Darius Smith isn't out of the question, but he's going to have to get cooking sooner rather than later. Next up on my list is Aaron Jones, plus 4.45 grade. He's actually been off to a little bit of I guess not slower start, but he's had a tougher last couple games. I know he's coming back from injury. You look, he hasn't had a 100-yard game since way early in the season. I think it was actually that Saints game as well, one of those second or third games of the season. He's struggled since then to really kind of get anything going. He's helped out in the passing game a little bit, but it's been a long time since he's had a 100-yard game even in total. Only a couple touchdowns over the course of the last handful plus of weeks. So there's a little bit of room for growth there still with Aaron Jones and seeing what he can do through the remainder of the season. But still, he comes in on my list at 987, number 7 on my list. Number 6 is Jair Alexander, who is having a phenomenal season. He is my last defender on this list. And again, offense probably has a little bit of an advantage over the defensive players, but noteworthy that only Jair Alexander and Za'Darius Smith on the defensive side of the ball made my top 10 list. And again, it's worth noting again that Za'Darius Smith was my highest rated player of anyone last season. So defensive players can grade high as well. Kenny Clark's always, usually in my top 5 when the season is done. So defensive players can grade well. The fact that Green Bay only has 2 on this list and none in the top 5 kind of tells you where this team, where their strengths and weaknesses lie. But Jair Alexander obviously having a tremendous season. Had the injury this past week, or that grade would probably be even higher. But really the last 2 weeks, because he only played a handful of snaps the week before. So he'd probably be a little bit higher on this list if he hadn't been injured for a couple games, but still comes in at number 6. Number 5, Elgton Jenkins. Again, really nice season so far. Has had to play some left tackle, some left guard, some center, some right tackle, everything but right guard, and he's played well at all of them. I do think he has a couple lapses now and again, and I don't think that maybe he's quite the player that he gets credit for sometimes just yet. I think people just look at him and say he's one of the best left guards in football. He's not there yet. He's very good. He's the 3rd best offensive lineman on this team. He's eventually probably going to be the best offensive lineman on this team at some point. His trajectory is going amazing, but I don't think he's quite to the point where people think he is yet, but still a damn good football player and still 5th on my list of highest graded Packers so far this season. Number 4, the duly minted top paid offensive lineman in all of football, of course, David Bakhtiari. Again, another player whose grade would be even higher in all likelihood had he not missed a couple games. Still 4th on my list with a plus 7.90 grade. He has just been even better than what he has been over the course of really last season and kind of towards the end of the season before that. Last season, if you remember, he really struggled with bull rushes to really start the season, and it kind of continued up until later in the year. He's been much better at that this year than he was a season ago. He's been solid against in run blocking. He's been great in pass protection. He's just a plug and play stud at left tackle, and you can't ask for much more than what you get out of David Bakhtiari, which is why he's the highest paid offensive lineman in all of football. Number 3 on my list is Davante Adams. Again, another player who would probably be much higher, or at least have a much higher grade, had it not been for some injuries. He has played at a ridiculously high level, arguably the top receiver in football. I know he's coming off of a game where he had the fumble and a couple drops, but that has been by far the exception to the rule. His route running is ridiculous. His ability to release off the line of scrimmage, contested catches, big plays, you name it, he can do it all. And then even in the game where he had a lot of struggles with the drops and the fumble, he still comes back hurt, injured, plays in the game, and makes the game-winning touchdown. It's not always the mistakes that you make, it's how you make up for them and how you finish, and he finished strong, and he's having just an incredible season. Number 2 on my list, Corey Linsley. He has had a plus 1.0 or better grade in every game for the Packers this season except for one. Even in that game, he was at like a plus 0.65. He has been tremendous. He's been consistent. He's been good in every single game. Easily the most consistent Packer this season. It'd be really interesting to see how number 2, 3, and 4 with Linsley, Adams, and Bakhtiari would grade out if all of them played in every game this season. It'd be neck and neck between all 3 of them, but they're all playing fantastic football. And right now, because he's played in every game and he's played well in every game, Corey Linsley gets the number 2 spot so far this season. And number 1 on my list, of course, no surprise, Aaron Rodgers. And again, quarterback gets a little bit of a bump here because of the importance of the position and how many plays that they have the ability to make. But when you've got a quarterback who's consistently making plays and very rarely making mistakes, you're going to end up with a plus 20.2 grade like Aaron Rodgers does. And he's easily still the MVP of this Packers team. He's the one that is going to lead them to victory more often than not. In this last game against the Jaguars, he wanted the main difference in that game. One team had Aaron Rodgers and one team had Jake Luton. You switch those two, Jaguars win that game without question, with the difference in quarterback play in that game. So this is still a team whose bread is buttered by QB1 and Aaron Rodgers, and he has played at a much higher level. He's already graded higher this season combined than he did all of last season in 18 games combined. So that tells you at how high of a level he is playing so far through 9 games this season. Half the games a better grade than what he had last season in Matt LaFleur's first year. All right, that's going to do it for me. Keep an eye on that injury report and who is in and out of practice on Friday. Usually that is a big tell. Of course, the big name to keep an eye on is Davante Adams. Make sure to check out Andrew and Kyle on today's Pack-A-Day podcast. I'll be right back here tomorrow. And until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.